Hollywood loves to show them to us. Knights in heavy, clumsy armor who can barely move. And if they fall, they lie helplessly, like overturned beetles. You're standing on a film set, you see this actor in a prop, impossibly heavy suit. He's lifted onto a horse by a crane. He falls helplessly like a tin doll, and everyone around laughs. This image has been seared into our subconscious, becoming the truth we've accepted without question. We want to believe in this romanticized image of noble, if a bit clumsy, but powerful warriors whose steel armor was a symbol of invincibility, albeit at the cost of complete loss of mobility. But the truth is, this image is a lie. Beneath this dazzling but false facade lies not just a misconception, but a fundamental distortion of history, a convenient yet utterly wrong interpretation. The main myth we've been sold goes like this. Knights in armor were cumbersome, sluggish, barely able to move, making them easy targets on the battlefield. So, why has such a seemingly powerful legend become so deeply ingrained in our minds? The answer is simple, it's profitable. Hollywood needs vivid, dramatic images, not historical accuracy. Popular culture opted for a convenient and impactful depiction, an ironclad giant who is easily defeated or who heroically dies due to his own unwieldiness rather than from superior forces or the enemy's skill. This isn't just a mistake, it's a manipulation of our perception, a substitution of incredible athleticism and martial prowess for a myth about clumsy tin cans. But today, we're going to strip away this shiny yet false veneer from the myth of slow, cumbersome knights. You'll discover why real medieval warriors were not just soldiers, but elite athletes whose agility, endurance, and combat prowess would astound even modern-day special forces operatives. Get ready, because what you're about to hear will completely change your perception of medieval warriors forever. The myth of knights in armor being clumsy on land isn't just a mistake. It's a Hollywood fabrication that brazenly disregards anatomical accuracy and the practical design of combat equipment. We're constantly fed the image of a knight as a ponderous, slow giant who can barely lift his sword, let alone run or jump. We've grown accustomed to thinking that donning steel armor is like being locked in a metal prison, with no way out except onto the battlefield as a motionless target. But what if I told you that every single element of this steel shell was designed for movement, for deadly grace, and not for restrictive immobility? Forget everything you've seen in the movies. Imagine yourself in the center of a training ground. You stand in full plate armor, not just a costume, but combat gear, fitted to you like a second skin. You feel how each element, the cuirass, the pauldrons, the greaves, encases your body, not pressing down but moving with you like a high-precision mechanism. You take a deep breath, feeling the breastplate subtly follow your every movement. Then, with unexpected ease, you make a light jump. The metal doesn't clatter, it merely whispers faintly. And just like that, you're no longer just standing. You vault onto a horse, stirrupless, with incredible agility. Your legs, arms, torso, everything obeys your will. You begin to run, feeling only the rhythm of your heart, the thud of your iron-shod sabatons on the ground, not the suffocating weight of the metal. You feel not like a prisoner, but a predator, ready to strike. This wasn't a fantasy. It was the daily reality for the elite warriors of the Middle Ages. But why then is this image so radically different from what we've been led to believe? The answer lies in understanding engineering principles and physiology rather than in dramatic effects. In reality, the weight of full-plate armor ranged from 20 to 30 kilograms. Does that sound like a lot? But this weight was evenly distributed across the entire body rather than hanging like a dead weight on the shoulders. For comparison, a modern infantry soldier in full combat gear, body armor, helmet, weapon, ammunition, and a first aid kit carries a comparable and sometimes even greater weight. The key difference? A knight's armor was designed not just for protection, but for movement. Its anatomical design, with floating rivets and hinges, ensured full mobility for every joint. This allowed knights not just to walk, but to run, jump, perform somersaults, and even acrobatic feats that Hollywood couldn't even dream of. Let's take, for example, the legendary Jean II Le Mangre Boussicot, Marshal of France. His contemporaries wrote that he could do somersaults in full plate armor, minus his helmet, dance in chainmail, leap onto a horse without stirrups, and even scale walls. This was not an exception, but rather the result of decades of intensive training and the perfection of armor making. Armor wasn't a rigid shell that hindered movement, but a sophisticated, high-tech extension of the body designed for maximum effectiveness in combat. So, battle armor was not a burden, not a prison of steel, but a high-tech extension of the body, allowing elite warriors to perform acrobatic feats and maintain incredible mobility. It was a second skin that protected and provided an advantage, rather than slowing them down. But what if this steel second skin, so light and agile on land, suddenly finds itself in the embrace of the most treacherous element, water? Will it be a salvation or a deadly anchor when the ground gives way? So, we've debunked the myth of cumbersome armor, showing that steel was a second skin, not a prison. But Hollywood and popular culture don't stop there. They perpetuate the next equally persistent illusion. The notion of knights as untrained aristocrats, noblemen whose battlefield service amounted to swinging a sword once a year, with the rest of their days spent in feasting and idleness. It's believed that these noble warriors, incapable of prolonged physical exertion, were simply a product of social status, not grueling training. It's a convenient image, romantic, but entirely false. But the truth, as always, is far more brutal and striking. Forget about knights incapable of forced marches and hard labor. Forget the notion that physical labor was the prerogative of commoners. True knights were war machines forged by years of relentless training. Imagine yourself at dawn, long before the first rays of the sun. You feel ice-cold sweat trickling down your face, mixing with the dust and grime of the training ground. Your lungs are burning from hours of running in full gear, not just in armor, but with a battle axe or warhammer clutched in your hands. Every swing of that weapon sends a dull ache through your shoulders, your lower back, but you keep going because stopping means weakness, and weakness means death on the battlefield. You feel the calluses on your palms tear open, blood mixing with sweat, as you spend hours drilling strikes, parries, and combinations. Your muscles tremble from exertion, every step a struggle after endless forced marches across rugged terrain. This isn't just training, it's a daily act of conquering yourself, a matter of survival where every lost minute, every missed set could cost you your life. This is not a metaphor, nor is it an exaggeration. This is the sensory imprint of a brutal reality you've just experienced. But why do we so stubbornly cling to the opposite, to the image of a pampered aristocrat, when history tells a completely different story? The answer lies in the systematic distortion of facts, in the preference for a beautiful legend over an uncomfortable truth. In fact, medieval knighthood demanded a level of physical fitness from its practitioners that would impress even modern-day special forces operatives. Let's consider again Jean II's Le Mangre Boussicot, the very same marshal of France who danced in chainmail. He trained constantly, running long distances, spending hours practicing with a battle axe and warhammer, and climbing walls to build strength and endurance. This wasn't a pastime, it was a vital necessity. From an early age, knightly training included not just etiquette, but also the 7 knightly virtues: horsemanship, swimming, archery, climbing walls, participation in tournaments, wrestling, fencing, long jump, and even dancing, all of which developed the body and coordination. Medieval training had striking parallels with modern military practices: weighted marches, overcoming obstacles, and working with heavy objects. All of this was an integral part of their preparation. Knights could not afford to be weak. Their survival, success in battle, and by extension, their reputation and wealth, directly depended on their physical fitness and endurance. Hollywood's knights in their silk shirts and perpetually holding a glass of wine, that's an insult to the memory of the true warriors who were the elite athletes of their time. Thus, knights were not just warriors, but highly disciplined athletes whose physical conditioning was comparable to, and sometimes even exceeded, the requirements of modern special forces units. For them, this was not a hobby or a luxury, but a matter of life and death. The key to victory and survival in a world where weakness meant certain death. But even the most seasoned athlete faces an irresistible force when the ground gives way beneath their feet, and their steel armor, so light and agile on land, becomes a deadly anchor. Or is it? Could water be the battlefield where all the myths about knights finally drown? But even the most seasoned athlete faces an insurmountable force when the ground gives way beneath their feet, and their steel armor, so light and agile on land, turns into a deadly anchor. Or does it? Could water be the battlefield where all the myths about knights finally drown? The myth of a knight in full armor instantly drowning upon falling into water is one of the most enduring and dramatic Hollywood portrayals, one that completely ignores the nuances of armor construction, the warrior's physical conditioning, and, most surprisingly, the unexpected role of the gambeson. We are constantly told that steel inevitably drags its wearer to the bottom, turning any body of water into a deadly trap for the ironclad warrior. It's a narrative of helplessness and inescapable doom, perfectly suited for crafting tragic scenes. But imagine a different scenario, one you won't see in the movies. You're standing on a narrow pontoon bridge, which suddenly collapses under enemy attack. In an instant, the ground gives way beneath you, and you plunge into the icy, churning water. The metal of your armor, which a second ago felt like a second skin, instantly becomes monstrously heavy, dragging you down with unrelenting force. You feel the icy water seep beneath your clothes, soaking into every fiber, chilling you to the bone. Every breath is an immense struggle. The cold burns your lungs and panic begins to swell, threatening to consume you whole. You desperately try to rip off your helmet, unbuckle the seemingly endless straps, fighting for every second on the surface. The cold, merciless water envelops you, whispering of the inevitable. You feel your body slowly but surely sinking, and desperately search for something to hold on to, grasping at debris, at the air, at any hope. This isn't just discomfort, it's a primal fear, a sense of total loss of control as your protection becomes your own prison. This sensory overload you just experienced is exactly what Hollywood wants you to feel, wants you to believe in instant drowning. But reality, as always, is far more complex and much more interesting. Why is it that what seems obvious actually hides several layers of deception? Naturally, our intuition tells us that dozens of kilograms of steel would instantly drag a person to the bottom, and in some cases, that's exactly what happened. Think of the tragic fate of Frederick Barbarossa, who drowned while crossing a river, but he was wearing chainmail, and underneath it, a thick, densely padded arming doublet, or gambeson. Chainmail absorbs water, becoming heavy, and a waterlogged gambeson turns into a sponge, which quickly adds weight and pulls you under. In this scenario, you are truly doomed unless you can free yourself quickly. However, plate armor, which emerged later, offered much better chances of survival. Their design was different. Individual pieces of the armor could be unfastened or removed relatively quickly, especially if the warrior was well trained and kept their cool. Moreover, thinner padded undergarments, which absorbed less water, were often worn beneath the plates. But here lies the main paradox, which turns everything upside down. Experiments conducted by modern reenactors show that a gambeson, contrary to all logic, can act as an improvised life jacket. If it doesn't have time to become fully saturated, the air trapped within its padded layers can keep a person afloat for several precious minutes, giving them a chance to escape. This is precisely why, even though most medieval people could not swim, warriors regularly crossed water obstacles. They did this by using ropes, pulling each other across, or clinging to their horses. This required not only exceptional physical fitness, as we mentioned before, but also discipline, ingenuity, and the ability to quickly assess the situation. A knight who fell into the water was not automatically a dead man. He was a warrior cast into extreme circumstances, where survival depended on his skills and knowledge. So, contrary to popular belief, it wasn't the metal itself that was an instant death sentence, but rather the waterlogged gambeson that proved to be the main threat in the water. But, paradoxically, a properly fitted gambeson could even save a life, transforming into an improvised life vest, giving precious minutes to fight for survival. We've debunked the myths of clumsiness and helplessness, showing that knights were elite athletes, capable of surviving even in the most extreme conditions. But there's another deeper illusion that conceals the true nature of knighthood, replacing it with a Hollywood gloss. And this illusion is far more dangerous than any sword, because it distorts our understanding of history and human nature. We've shattered myths about their clumsiness and helplessness, showing that knights were elite athletes capable of surviving even in the most extreme conditions. But there's another, even deeper illusion that conceals the true nature of knighthood, replacing it with a Hollywood veneer. And this illusion is far more dangerous than any sword because it distorts our understanding of history and human nature. So, we've reached the end of our journey through these steel illusions. Throughout this entire journey, a dominant myth imposed by popular culture has loomed over us that knights in armor were nothing more than awkward, ponderous metal suits that could barely move, would often fall, and would helplessly drown if they ever found themselves in water. This was a convenient, romanticized falsehood that rendered them vulnerable and essentially just a backdrop for more dynamic heroes. For years, we've had the image drilled into our heads of a ridiculous ironclad warrior whose only strength lay in the thickness of his armor rather than in his own physical prowess. Remember that image of the knight from the beginning of our journey, a helpless actor being lifted onto a horse by a crane and then falling and unable to get up like an overturned beetle. That's the picture we were sold. Now contrast that with what you've learned. Imagine not an actor, but Jean Boucicaut, Marshal of France, who didn't just walk but danced in chainmail, performed somersaults in full armor, leaped onto his horse without stirrups like the wind. He didn't just survive in water, he fought for his life, using every ounce of his superhuman training, every nuance of his gear to stay afloat. This isn't just a fantasy, it's the sensory imprint of a brutal yet incredible reality. The uncomfortable truth is that medieval knights were elite athletes whose physical training and endurance were on par with, and sometimes even exceeded, the demands of modern special forces units. Their armor wasn't a steel prison, but rather a high-tech extension of the body, providing complete mobility and protection, not restriction. The weight of 20-30 kilograms was distributed so evenly that it allowed them not only to run and jump, but also to perform complex acrobatic stunts. And the myth of instant drowning collapses like a house of cards when we understand that it was the padding underneath the armor, not the metal itself, that posed the main threat, and that even that padding could become a temporary life vest. So why is it so crucial to grasp this truth? Because this is more than just a story about knights. It's a lesson in how easily we succumb to comforting but fabricated narratives. It's a reminder that true history is always more complex, more interesting, and often far more brutal than any Hollywood fairy tales. Understanding the true nature of knighthood enables us not only to appreciate them as exceptional athletes and warriors, but also to critically examine other historical misconceptions that shape our worldview, forcing us to question any commonly accepted truth. Now, the next time you see that clumsy, helpless knight on screen being hoisted onto his horse by a crane only to comically fall off, you'll know the truth. You won't see a romanticized image, but a caricature that dishonors the memory of true warriors. You'll know that beneath that gleaming yet false facade lies a story of strength, endurance, and incredible skill, of people who were born and forged for war, not for beautiful but dishonest cinematic portrayals.